The Elizabethan age lasted from 1558 to 1603. So Queen Elizabeth I, she died in 1603, and she was known as the Virgin Queen because she had never married. Now, she had a sister called Bloody Mary. That's a different thing. She had a sister called Mary who was known as Bloody Mary, and she had a relative called Mary. This Mary is different from the Mary who came to be known as Bloody Mary. This other Mary is Mary, Queen of Scots. And Elizabeth had to get Mary, Queen of Scots, killed because Mary, Queen of Scots, was plotting against Elizabeth. And so Elizabeth got her killed. But when Elizabeth was on her deathbed, she somehow appointed James VI of Scotland. He was the son of Mary, Queen of Scots. She named him as her own successor, and so he would have to become a Protestant, and he would come to England, and he would be James the First of England, James the Sixth of Scotland, and James the First of England. And so James the Sixth of Scotland came to England. He became a Protestant, and he became the King of England. Now, this man was originally a Roman Catholic. Mary, Queen of Scots, was a Roman Catholic. And so James had turned Protestant, and he had become the King of England. And so a large section of the population there in Scotland and here in England, they were against James because he had turned Protestant. And that forms a background to what came to be called the Gunpowder Plot. You know, this Gunpowder Plot, it has a reference, somewhere in Shakespeare's play Macbeth. So, James the First of England, he and his queen reign here. And during his reign, we find what we call the masque, M-A-S-Q-U-E. It's a tradition in literature. You can look that up. And he continued to reign, and he reigned from 1603 to 1625. He died in 1625. So now he had the Bible sort of rewritten right from 1604 to 1611. It went on, and the Book of Common Prayers came out. And then he had a son called Charles I. James the First of England has a son called Charles I. This Charles I, in the year 1624, just a year before his father's death. As I told you, James I of England, he died in 1625. And Charles I, in the year 1624, he went and married a French princess called Princess Henrietta Maria. Now, she was a Roman Catholic, and the English public did not welcome this at all. But somehow the marriage had happened in 1624. And so the English public thought that when Princess Henrietta Maria would come here, they would make sure that she gave up all those Roman Catholic ways and that she turned Protestant. But that did not happen. In the year 1625, James I passed away. He died, and Charles I became king. And he was indulgent towards his wife. He allowed her to practice whatever she was practicing. And he didn't have a firm hand over many things. And so, because the queen herself was a Roman Catholic and she continued to practice and follow those ways, those people who had turned Protestant perforce, they became bold, they came out in the open, and they openly claimed to be Roman Catholics. And now there was a different atmosphere prevailing here. Now, the courtiers enjoyed a very special position of power and authority because they were Protestants. And they could not have this, Roman Catholicism gaining ground, because what would happen is that one day those Roman Catholics would get positions of power and authority, and these Protestant courtiers would lose their positions. This could not be tolerated. And so there was a lot of uneasiness within the country. And at such a time, this man Charles I is going to rule from 1625 to 1649. He will be beheaded. He will be beheaded in 1649, just because he allowed all those Roman Catholic ways to thrive. And of course, there were lots of other complaints. There were complaints about his policies, about the decisions that he took. But this Roman Catholicism was also a large contributing factor in all this. And so now the Parliament is not going to have any of this. Remember, we are talking of the year 1649 when Charles I will be beheaded, and Milton has come. Milton has become a popular name. Milton is in favor with Oliver Cromwell, who heads the Parliament. The Parliament is not going to accept Charles I with all these ways of his. And so the Parliament and the army will get together and they will initiate action to have the king executed, which means he will be beheaded. So in 1649, Charles I is beheaded. He has two sons, Charles II and James II. You remember Charles I's father was James I. So now Charles I's sons, two sons. One is Charles II and the other is James II. James II is a Roman Catholic, and Charles I's wife was, of course, a Roman Catholic, Princess Henrietta Maria. And so she is told to take her two sons and return to France and not to be in England. And all attempts to, have Charles II as the king of England, Scotland, Ireland is ruled out. And these two sons are sent along with the mother to France. Now this is the year 1649. 1649 to 1660. It's going to be an 11-year period, and this will be the time in history which will become known as the Interregnum or the Commonwealth period. Now, Oliver Cromwell has masterminded this whole thing, and he is going to call himself Lord Protector. He won't say, I'm the king, because obviously he's not the king. He is in fact going to abolish monarchy in England. Monarchy is over in England, at least for the time being, for the next 11 years. So this 11-year period is a period without a king. They have the Lord Protector, Oliver Cromwell. So Oliver Cromwell calls himself Lord Protector, but then those in power, they do strange things. So the Lord Protector somehow gets a law passed that the son of the Lord Protector will become the next Lord Protector. So how is it different from monarchy really? So the son of the Lord Protector is going to become Lord Protector. So when Oliver Cromwell will finally die, his son Richard Cromwell will become Lord Protector, but he's a weak man. He's not able to handle any of these state affairs, and so he resigns, and there is chaos in England. Now they don't know what to do. They want a king, they need a king. So they decide to call Charles II from France. He'll be recalled and he will be made to sit on the throne, and his powers will be restored to him. And so we have the term restoration. 1660. Charles II will be restored to the throne. It is a restoration of the Stuart dynasty, because Charles belonged to the Stuart dynasty, James Stuart. So it is a restoration of the Stuart dynasty, and it is a restoration of monarchy, because Oliver Cromwell had abolished monarchy. He had that protectorate system. So now monarchy is coming back. That's going to be restored. Yes, Charles II is restored and monarchy is restored. The Stuart dynasty is restored. And so we have what we call the Restoration period. Now, the Restoration period is a very important period in literature, because the literary tendencies, the political things that were happening, all these are very important. And you have, the diary of Samuel Pepys. You have that. So when you go through the diary of Samuel Pepys, you get to know the main tendencies of this age. We'll be looking at that in a separate video. We'll see what the Restoration period has been like. And you have very important texts. You have Absalom and Achitophel of Dryden. You have Mac Flecknoe. You have plenty of texts relating to this period, and you have a whole lot of drama, restoration drama. Mainly, you know, it's a very special kind of drama, very different from the Elizabethan tradition, which had a lot of Latin influence, Elizabethan drama. This drama has a lot of French influence, restoration drama, and there is a certain, openness and vulgarity to it. In fact, it was licentious because Charles II himself was a man who was given to a very loose kind of lifestyle. He had a wife called Catherine of Braganza, and they had no children at all. And the king had a number of liaisons with all kinds of women in his court, outside the court, everywhere. He had a number of illegitimate children. And if you look at that text, Absalom and Achitophel, you'll get to know a lot about the tendencies of this age.